So what we're talking about over here is the Taylor series. Okay, so suppose we have some function f of x, and you know the value of this function at a. So at a, the value is f of a, and this we know what is the value of f of a. And now I want to know what happens to the value of this function if I step a little bit away from a. So when a goes to a plus dA, then what happens to f of a? This is the question I want to ask. And this is given by what is called a Taylor series. We will not derive the Taylor series expansion. It is comes from your real analysis. Maybe you'll look at it in your maths course, or maybe you've seen it in your math methods course. So the formula is given as follows. The value of the function at a plus delta a is given by f of a plus delta a times the derivative of this evaluated at a plus dA square by 2 factorial, and then this is the second derivative, then the third derivative, and you can keep doing this indefinitely. So this is called the Taylor series expansion. What can you do with this? So if you know a and if you know delta a, then this is just a question of plugging in the numbers and evaluating this form. So just to give you an example, suppose, so you know that sine of pi by 6 or 30 degrees is half. But if I ask you, so this is 30 degrees. If you want to find out what is sine of 31 degrees, you can now use this formula. So sine of 31 degrees is basically sine of pi by 6 plus 1 degree written in radians. What is 1 degree written in radians? I have it written somewhere. 0.017. So this is 31 degrees written in radian form. And then one can just apply this Taylor expansion formula. So this is going to be sine of pi by 6 plus delta A is 0.017. What is derivative of sine x? It's cosine x. So cosine x evaluated at pi by 6 plus this thing square divided by 2 factorial. Second derivative of sine. So derivative of sine is sine goes to cosine goes to minus sine. So minus sine pi by 6 and so on. Then you can just put in the numbers. You know that sine pi by 6 is half. This is 0.017. Cosine pi by 6 is, I think, root 3 by 2, because sine 60 is root 3 by 2 plus negative of this thing is minus half. So let's make this negative half and so on. So you can keep evaluating these terms as far as you go. Each term is going to be smaller than the next one. Now, of course, we can't calculate terms all the way to infinity. So we have to stop somewhere. And then we will say that this is our approximation to sine 31. And this part that we have thrown away is what we call the error. So we realize that our calculation of sine 31 is not going to be exact, and the error in our calculation is going to be this. So you can call it an error, or you can call it the precision. So you can say that our precision in calculating sine of 31 is only up to 3 decimal places or up to 4 decimal places. After that, we don't know what is happening because we have neglected some of the higher order terms. So that gives rise to some error in our estimation. So we can do this kind of thing for a bunch of functions. So for example, suppose I say, so we had the formula f of a plus x is f of a plus, well, let's not call it x, let's call it delta a. Delta a df by dx. So this is the formula that we had. Suppose I take a equal to 0 and delta a I call it x, and now I can ask the question, what is sine of 0 plus x? So a is 0. So I know sine of 0 is 0. Question is, what happens if I move a little bit away from 0? So this, if I just apply this formula, I'll get sine of 0 plus x times cosine of 0 plus x square by 2 factorial, second derivative sine of 0 but with a negative sign, then x cube by 3 factorial, this is going to become cosine with a negative sign, and so on. So then you see this will, sine of 0 is 0, so this goes away, this goes away, so you're, and cosine of 0 is 1, so you're left with x minus x cubed by 3 factorial, and if you keep calculating more and more terms, you will get things like this. So this is a formula for sine of x. So this is an approximate formula. Higher order terms will give you some corrections. If you neglect the higher order terms, then you have some error in your estimation. So this is where you must have used this before in physics somewhere, the approximation that sine x is approximately equal to x when x is small. So this is where it comes from. It's just the first order term and you're neglecting all of the higher order terms. And this works when x is small. What do we mean by x is small? Okay, let's calculate this. So x and sine of x. So let's say 0 degrees, 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees. I'm just taking these because we know what these numbers are. Or in terms of radians, this is 0, this is pi by 6, this is pi by 4, pi by 3, pi by 2. Or you can actually write down their decimal forms, which I have written somewhere. 0.524, 0.707, 0.86, no. 0.785, 1.047. Correct, because 1 radian is something like 57 degrees. So 60 degrees will be a little bit more than that. And this is 1.57. And then what is the value of sine at each of these? Sine of 0 is 0. Sine of 30 degrees is half. Sine of 45 degrees is 1 over root 2. Sine of 60 is root 3 by 2, 0.866. Sine of 90 is 1. And then I can also find what is the error. So we've always been told that sine x is approximately equal to x. So let's see what is the error that we get when we do this, and relative error. So we will divide this by the actual value of sine x. So you can calculate. So when x is 0, then there is absolutely no error because sine x is exactly equal to x. But as the value of x increases, the difference between these two keeps increasing. So sin x goes farther and farther away from x, because the larger x gets, the more you need to include that x cubed by 3 factorial, x5 by 5 factorial. You have to also take care of all of those terms. But still, even at 30 degrees, if you see, this is 0.5 and this is 0.524. So it's less than 5% error over there. So which is a reasonable approximation. So in fact, here's a fun exercise. Why don't you write a Python program? So take 1 degree intervals, 1, 2, so from 0 to 90, 0 degrees, 1 degrees, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, all the way up to 90 degrees. In each case, calculate, so this is the value of x in degrees, calculate x in radians, calculate sine of x, and just find what is the relative error between them and list those out. You can't see. So I'm saying for each of these, you also list sine x and the error between sine x and x. So that should give you some feel for errors. So this was the Taylor expansion for sine x. You can do the same thing for cosine x. So you can ask the question, what is cosine of 0 plus x, given that you know that cosine of 0 is 1. So this will be cosine of 0 plus x times derivative of cosine is minus sine. So minus sine of 0 plus x squared by 2 factorial cosine minus sine minus cosine. So minus cosine 0 minus cosine derivative will give you plus sine, and so on. So you will get something like cosine of 0 being 1, sine of 0 is 0, don't care, sine of 0 is 0, don't care, cosine 0 is 1. So you will get something like 1 minus x squared by 2 factorial, and then if you take some other terms, you will get plus x 4 by 4 minus s 6 by 6, and so on. So this is the Taylor series expansion for cosine x. Similarly, you can check what is e to the power x. So e to the power x is going to be e to the power 0 plus x. You know e to the power 0 is 1. So then you will get something like 1 plus x squared by 2 factorial plus x cubed by 3 factorial, and so on. Or you can check what is 1 over 1 plus x, and this, let's take minus 1 over 1 minus x. This is 1 plus x squared plus x cubed, and so on. So in general, any kind of function that you have, it is possible to write down a Taylor series expansion. There is something called radius of convergence, which limits how far you can go. But okay, for the time being, we will not talk about that right now. Important to remember, of course, is that these formulae are always approximate. So the overall formula, of course, is fine, but you can never calculate all the terms. You will always truncate your series at some point, and so you will say, I'm only taking these terms, and all of these I'm going to ignore, and that's my error. So question is, how much error really is acceptable? Like, at what point should you cut this off? So it depends on what kind of system you're modeling. Based on the specific problem, certain level of error might be acceptable, certain amount might not be acceptable. So there's no fixed answer, there's no correct answer as to how much accuracy you want. So you decide that I want my answer to be accurate up to 5 decimal places. So then you take as many terms as it takes to get 5 decimal place accuracy. That's one way of looking at it. Often it depends on so normally you're doing this for some kind of an actual real life physical system, and what you'll be doing is, once you calculate this answer numerically, you might want to compare it with some experimental result, with some data. Now, any experimental data, any experimental result, any experimental measurement has a least count. So it has some experimental error of its own. So for example, let's say you're calculating the wavelength of some, in some spectrum, you're calculating the wavelength of some transition. In that, there is some error bar associated with the measurement that you've done. So maybe you calculated something is 600 nanometers, 600 plus or minus 2 nanometers. Let's say that's your measurement of the wavelength. So now if you're doing some calculation using numerical methods, you do your calculation, but remember that in the end, the accuracy of the experimental result is 2 nanometers. So there's no point taking 20 terms of your Taylor expansion and trying to get like some 15 decimal places accuracy, because in the end you only want like an accuracy of 2 nanometers. That's all you care about. So often the amount of accuracy that you need, or the amount of error that you're willing to tolerate, depends on the actual physical system that you're studying, the actual data that you have in your hand. Another very important consideration, especially in the context of these numerical methods, is computational time. So eventually when you're doing research, you will be writing long, complicated programs, and these programs will take time to run. At best, they might take a few seconds to run. Worst case situation, like at least in my work, that I have had to run programs which take multiple days, sometimes even weeks, to finish running. So in that case, runtime becomes a huge problem. If you're going to take, if you want a more accurate result, you want to take more terms in your Taylor expansion, fine, do it, but that's going to cost you time. So it's often a compromise between accuracy and running time. You can compromise on accuracy, have a less accurate answer, and then your program will run faster. Or if that accuracy is really important to you, if the error needs to be really, really small, then your program will have to run longer. So that's also one trade-off that you need to keep in mind. Okay, so the reason I introduced this Taylor expansion over here is that we are going to use it extensively in quite a few of these different numerical methods that we're looking at. So I thought I'll just give you an introduction to it so that we don't have to go through it again and again eventually. Of course, this is in case you haven't seen it before. If you have seen it before, then this is just a good revision for you. Okay, so that's it as far as the introduction is concerned, and we are ready to plunge into our first actual computational method.